when FW de Klerk stood up in Parliament on the 2nd of February in 1990 and announced the end of the state of emergency, the release of political prisoners and the unbanning of liberation movements, time stood still. 9 days later, Nelson Mandela walked free, but the years to come were years of blood and iron. The Boipatong Massacre happened as it did in the middle of the first Codesa negotiations, was intended to both to disrupt the negotiation process and to weaken the hand of liberation movements. What followed was a series of attempts by several participants in Codesa to use the massacre to their advantage. Now, joining us now to reflect on what happened on the 17th of June in 1992 is independent writer Monako Dibetle, who has a personal story about the events. Monako, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I suppose, you know, the passing of FW de Klerk has really taken many South Africans back as they read up on his history, you know, his rule, and the impact that apartheid had on South Africans. As we reflect on Boipatong and talk about the massacre, remembering, you know, the 45 lives that were lost, including an infant, it really takes South Africans backwards in recalling what exactly happened.
Of course. Look, I think the story about Boipatong is quite important to the history of South Africa and all South Africans. And the fact that, you know, former President FW de Klerk was, you know, at that time, you know, going through a process of, you know, the negotiation with the ANC through the National Party. Quite a lot of, you know, hanging questions still remain as to what was his, you know, position on the Boipatong massacre. But then we all know that there was the Goldstone Commission that happened immediately after the massacre in Boipatong, and it sort of, the evidence from the commission pointed to complicity from the state, that, you know, the ruling, you know, party by the time of the massacre had a hand in basically sponsoring the massacre in Boipatong. But now, even then, there was no direct evidence that former President FW de Klerk, you know, was directly involved in the process, because there were, you know, some formations within his government that were going on that, you know, there is speculation that maybe he did not know of those people, you know, and how they were instigating the violence in Boipatong.
So let's go back a little bit here and perhaps recall 1992 and the shocking images, the bloodshed, the horrors that came about from Boipatong. What do you recall, you know, about the day and perhaps the experience within your family?
Well, I was quite young, and thank you for that question. My father was a police officer, and he was seconded to Boipatong immediately after the massacre. You know, him being a police officer back then, remember there were black officials that would be doing riot policing in the townships, they'd done border controls and all of that. But he came back from you know, his stint in Boipatong as a peacekeeping force member from the SAP back then, a very changed person. He became an absent father. He had what they called cerebral atrophy, so he had some mental issues immediately after that, because now of the trauma that they endured during that whole, you know, episode and period. And for me, it's a personal story in the sense that even if it's more than a political story, it's also a mental health story. So you realize that quite a lot of police people or police officials from back in the day, they never underwent any form of how can I put it, some therapy after you know, all these violent events. And my father was one of those people that, you know, up to his, you know, his last days on this planet, he was still lamenting the fact that, you know, what he had experienced as a police officer back in the day, especially working in black communities as a black official, having to basically be part of a process that is basically, you know, inflicting pain on you, the people that are, you know, similar to your people, was quite harrowing for him.
As you speak about the mental situation and the impact of those horrific images, 4 days later, after that massacre occurred, Nelson Mandela visited the township, and what he said was that, you know, as I quote here, he says, "We're not dealing with human beings, we're dealing with animals. I will never forget what de Klerk and the IFP have done to our people," which was really quite telling in itself about how devastating those images were, and how helpless some of the people were in trying to get away from the situation. I mean, we saw a lot of reaction on social media with the passing of FW de Klerk. We saw mixed reaction, a lot of people speaking against the atrocities, and especially him not admitting that apartheid was indeed a crime against humanity. What have you made of the social media activity, as well as the responses and the feedback we've seen over the past couple of days?
Look, you know, we need to appreciate the engagement that we've seen on social media, and even in traditional media itself. You know, people would always want to know what really happened, and how did, you know, the president of the time, FW de Klerk, you know, had a, how can I put it, it's like he had an influence in what happened in Boipatong. Because to my point that I made earlier on, you know, the Goldstone Commission never really directly pointed a finger at him, but then at the end of the day, he was the president of the country, and he was the person in power, so he could make decisions and he could sort of make instructions. So the people, you know, talking in social media, I think we need to get to a point where we realize that, you know, when somebody is gone, you know, there's nothing that really can get from them. But then I think we missed an opportunity from basically pulling out and dragging out the truth out of FW and making him understand that, you know, what happened there really changed a lot of people's lives and was quite devastating. And the pain continues. And we see now with the discussions in social media that people they still have unanswered questions. They still want to know really what was his involvement and what did he feel about it. To his grave, we're still not quite sure what really he felt about this.
Absolutely. And of course, a lot of reaction has also been centered around that video we saw released of his apology. I mean, some people, even this morning, questioning why this video was released after his passing. Surely he could have spoken before his passing.
For sure. And look, when you read on the literature about, you know, the transition of you know, of our country into a democratic, you know, state as we know it now, you'd realize that FW was caught between, you know, a rock and a hard place. He knew that he had to be the person that was going to, you know, help, you know, the people of South Africa to get out of the situation that we were before 1990, and at the same time he needed to appease his own people. You know, to make sure that, you know, even if we move into a democratic kind of sort of situation in South Africa, his own people, which are the Afrikaner people, are also going to be protected. So I think he waited up to the very, very last days to basically make that assertion and to make that decision to say that, look, I supported a process of healing, I supported a process of change. But then, you know, it's better for me to be saying it now because I'm dying, because had I said it when I was fit and I was strong, I still want to get the onslaught from my own people. So he did not want to be a pariah within his own people, but then at the same time he knew that what he was doing for the black mass was quite important, and it shaped what we have now as the South Africa that you and I know.
Monako, very quickly, just touching on what you spoke of with your father being a police officer at the time and the impact of the bloodshed and essentially the horrors of what happened in Boipatong. Let's talk a little bit about how it shaped you, having to see your father behave in that manner and really just watching him going through the pains without really getting any help and not really being able to speak out of how this had affected him.
Look, what it has done for me personally, really, it's painful, and that's why it led to me starting to write things about it. So when I was still with the Mail and Guardian newspaper, I used to write, quite a lot of political issues as well. But then this story hits right at home because it really affected my family kind of lifestyle, and it built me to become a person who is very much conscious of what really happened in the past to basically usher in what we have now as a democratic South Africa. Quite a lot of stuff happened there. We went to the TRC. Not a lot of people were out there to basically go and tell the honest truth. A lot of people got amnesty, but then we don't think that they deserved it. You realize when you go through a lot of literature about that as well that there were people during the massacre in Boipatong who basically were white people who had blackface, who were like they were shooting at the people there. There were Inkatha militants, there were police officials, there were people from the army. So a lot of stories still are hanging around this issue, and I think we need to start writing about this.
Absolutely. Let's leave it there for now. The quality of your audio, they're not looking very good. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your story. Independent writer Monako Dibetle. We give you hope and sympathy. Boipatong, may your loved ones rest in peace. Those are some of the words sung by Brenda Fassie on her album Your Baby, released in 1992.